I want to welcome all of you back to our ongoing series of conversations pertaining to topics that interest us in classical education. This is going to be an audio-only conversation with Heather Brown. This is Mike Terry, superintendent of Founders Classical Academies, and Heather is our associate superintendent for growth and culture. So I apologize that you don't get to see us today. I think they'll survive. Don't you, Heather?
I agree, and I think this is a great and important conversation. So I'm excited to talk about this today with our listeners.
Good. Well, I hate pronouns, and in this case, I'm talking about things that stand in the place of actual nouns, and in this case, this is a conversation on friendship. That's this we're talking about today, and we're gonna dig into this a little bit. I did want to say, ordinarily we would be on camera. Our producer Shannon Hind is away today, so we're kind of flying solo here. We had Frank come in and press the record button, so hopefully all that will work out in our favor. We'll see how it goes.
I think it'll be great.
Yeah. Well, I don't do this for a living, so anything's possible. Friendship is, I guess, let's just jump right into it. Friendship is a really, I think, under-discussed topic, particularly when people talk about community. There's this idea that we do community together, that you're in various kinds of communities based on your special interests, and those tend to be narrow. You know, if I'm in the Comic-Con community, we have which I'm not, but if I were, we would have a very specific interest. And in fact, if you've ever seen the people dress up for these sorts of things, they have very narrow interests, like characters that they really care about.
And they feel very strongly about those things as well.
Yeah, very strongly. And they may have, contention with others in that same group just simply because they like other characters. But I think for us, we need to broaden kind of our associations as much as we can, and the reason for that, I think, is that we have big things to do, and I think any community that has big things to do needs to think about the relationships that they have with others beyond like a narrow sphere. Like if I'm working on my property, and I could say, I'm great friends with this electrician, and he's going to help me with my wiring, but I may have a lot of other things to do that go way beyond just whether I've got 220 running to my shop or not, right? So I want friends that can do all kinds of things, and I want friends versus just associates. I want people that will live life with me, and that's certainly something we want for our teachers, right? Because you think about the amount of time they spend together every day, and why, and we want it to be more than just associates.
And I think that's one of the things that contributes to the richness of our schools and our campuses, and then it eventually contributes to the richness of our lives, is when we have interactions with people from all different walks of life and all different life experiences or areas of expertise, and we bring them together and really develop friendships with them. So it's not an association or just a simple interaction, but there's something deeper there when you use the word friendship versus community.
Right, and we'll talk about that a bit. I gave a presentation to some of our teachers down in Schertz. We have a school in Schertz, we have a school in Leander, and one in Bastrop. And then at the beginning of school, I like to talk to as many teachers as I can and to set the stage for the school year. And we always do that through our Founders Teacher Initiative, where Jason Karros and you and others, and I myself included, will talk big picture. What is classical education? What are our pillars? Knowledge, virtue, liberty. And Jason and I have been talking about those and some of our other conversations. And what is that all about? What does that have to do with education? But beyond that, I think there are a lot of great conversations that we can have with the teachers. So I went down to Schertz and spent a little time down there one morning right before school started, and I made them think of the friends that we have in literature, because I wanted them to think about themselves and why they're together and what they're trying to accomplish, and so I gave them some examples like Goethe and Kai, which I would say a few of them had a little trouble identifying. I know you know who they are.
From the Snow Queen.
From the Snow Queen. Gerda and Kai, Wilbur and Charlotte, Tom and Huck, or Huck and Jim, Bilbo and Gandalf, Odysseus and Eumaeus. I mentioned Paul and Timothy, and even Lucy and Aslan from the Chronicles of Narnia. They turned into great friends. And I pointed out to them that each pair were friends for a different reason. You think of Gerda and Kai. Well, they were these childhood friends and loved each other just because they lived across the balcony from each other. And then it turned into a thing later, an adventure. Wilbur and Charlotte were thrown together, right? Tom and Huck were just childhood friends. Nothing particularly special there, except they both shared a big imagination. Bilbo and Gandalf, one wanted a quiet life and one had big things to do, and somehow those two things came together out of necessity. And Odysseus and Eumaeus, of course, Eumaeus was the longtime friend who became a reluctant participant in the slaughter of the suitors in the Odyssey. I mentioned Lucy and Aslan and their walks together, the walks and talks that they would have as they were Aslan's trying to help Lucy find her way through life.
You know what I love about these characters is that they're unlikely friends, right? Who would think a small child, a young girl, and a lion would become friends, or a pig and a spider, right? That there's an uncommonality to them, and yet somehow they found something common and beautiful and developed a friendship from it.
Yeah, and you see that even with Gerda and Kai, you think about their story where they'd sit on their balconies and play until the shard of the mirror penetrated Kai's heart, and off he went. Gerda felt something for him, and she worried for him, right? And even though they were childhood friends, it had to go beyond that, because Gerda felt a need, to protect Kai, and went off on her own journey to try to find him. And we know that whole story is the inspiration for the White Witch and Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And we see similar things like that happen with the children in that story, and in the other characters. But what I found with Gerda and Kai, and Wilbur and Charlotte, Tom and Huck, Bilbo and Gandalf, Odysseus and Eumaeus, Lucy and Aslan, and I also referenced Paul and Timothy. There was a shared sense of purpose. There was a journey that had to be taken. They weren't always a journey they both agreed to go on. Bilbo went reluctantly. I laugh about that whole scene from time to time. But they had this purpose, this mission, this journey that was required of them.
And I think in that journey, too, they faced adversity. All of these relationships, as we look through the historical timeline of these stories, there's something that occurred that was difficult. There's something they had to overcome. And because of their shared experience and because of their love for one another, they were able to overcome those things in a unique way together. It wasn't always easy, right? We see the struggles and the challenges that each of them went through, and the doubts and the fears that also crept in. But there's a beautiful thing that occurs as you build a friendship that has a common goal and a common purpose. As you face adversity or challenges, you're able to overcome that with someone alongside you, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, so can you see how that might be an interesting conversation to have with teachers?
I think it's a great conversation with teachers. And in thinking about this conversation we were having today, I started considering some of the stereotypes that people have about teachers. We had a discussion a few weeks ago about being countercultural in our campuses and how we relate with our students and what we present to our students, what we expect of our students. And I think we're also countercultural in what we cultivate in relationships with our teachers. There's a lot of stereotypes about teachers' lounges and how teachers will relate to one another and the conversations that they have, whether they're unkind to students in those conversations, or they're not very generous of thought, and we're doing something different with our teachers, and I love that. And that's why I love we're not talking about teacher behaviors or what a teacher might look like, but we're talking about beautiful relationships and friendships between teachers that inevitably will impact our students in a positive way.
And just for the record, we don't have teachers' lounges.
No, we don't.
And kind of for that reason, right?
Right.
You want to foster these positive relationships between the teachers. And there's just, I don't know, maybe the teachers who listen will disagree. Like, we need a teachers' lounge. And I hear you. What you need is to spend time with your children. But I know you need a break from that as well. But as I'm looking out at all these teachers, and there may have been 75 or 80 in the room, I challenge them to think about their colleagues in the room as comrades on a journey. You think of the Hobbit and all the dwarves going out together. They had a purpose, and I guess they had a reason for having Bilbo there. It may have just been luck that they were looking for, but he turned out to be a whole lot more than that. But one of the things that I really emphasized was the importance of appreciating a person who shares your values, and that really, I mean, sometimes as children we're thrown together and we just kind of are there together, and we've always known people, and so you just play with them and then do work together as you get older. But there's this intentionality that I think is so needed in what we do. And I hope that teachers can look at each other and say, oh, you agree virtue is important. And that's actually a big part of this conversation.
It is.
Oh, you believe that forming these children into responsible human beings is important. Oh, you think it's important to know things. Oh, well, I believe all those things too. Let's talk. And to me, that's kind of like the starting point.
It is. It starts at that place. And one of the things it does is it also brings in each person's experiences. We might have an art teacher who has a love and a passion for art, and who has a unique ability to create beauty and emulate beauty and expose children to beautiful things in a really unique and special way. And sitting next to her might be a mathematics teacher who understands the beauty of order and the virtue of truth in numbers. And bringing those two people together, again, kind of like those people in the story who might be unlikely friends, a mathematician and an artist might not naturally come together. But when they come together with that commonality of virtue and love of virtue and cultivating that in students, they can bring their experiences from different ways and walks of life. And it becomes this beautiful, rich experience where they, in turn, are learning from one another and experiencing something beautiful together.
How did you encourage your teachers when you were headmaster to intentionally be friends? And it doesn't all, it's like we make the children call each other friend, and it's like, that's not always true. They're not necessarily friends. They're there together, but we do want them to be friends. It's not just a buzzword. And we definitely want our faculty to be friends.
We do.
So how would you tackle that in your school when you were at Prosper?
I think one of the things that I was intentional about is creating opportunities for friendship. We can get very bogged down, and this often happens in schools where a teacher gets so busy with the tasks of the day, the needs of the students, the communication with the parents, the grading, the creating, all of those things, that you can silo yourself as a teacher. You close your classroom door and you just get your work done. And so creating opportunities for teachers to come together, even if it's not in a teacher's lounge, but an after-school event or at a staff meeting where we're talking about ourselves and our families and we're sharing a little bit about ourselves with each other. One of the ways I would encourage that is also to share passions and loves. Let's use the art teacher, for example, or a music teacher. Share something that they love about art in a staff meeting, or that they love and they want to showcase for the school, so that they're sharing a little bit about themselves. Teachers sometimes are afraid to do that, and afraid to open up, and afraid to be vulnerable and build friendships. But the more opportunity we can create for authentic conversations, the better. I think another way I did that is by modeling an example, caring about who our teachers are. We often talk as teachers about making sure we know, hey, if a student plays soccer on Monday morning, ask them how their soccer game was on Saturday, or ask them, how their birthday party was last weekend. Well, we should be doing the same with our colleagues and our community of friends as staff. And so taking the time to pay attention and notice when a staff member has something special happening in their life, or a birthday or a haircut, right? But just caring about them as individuals, not just as employees or coworkers. Because friendship is real and it is authentic, and it requires us knowing each other in a way beyond just as a coworker.
Well, I think it's important as we do anything in our classical schools that we reach back into history, into the classical period, a period of ancient Greece and Rome, and see if they said anything about these topics. I'll try not to let this descend into a lecture, but I will tell you that a fellow by the name of Cicero, which hopefully our listeners will have heard of, beyond just the burb in Chicago, he was an important thinker in the first century BC. Politician, lawyer, writer, wrote a lot constantly. We lost much of it, but not all of it. He was the consul of Rome. He was basically the leader of Rome, and a proconsul twice. He overthrew a major conspiracy called the Catiline Conspiracy that would have probably seen the end of the Roman Republic. Now, he did live to see the end of the Roman Republic, unfortunately, and refused to participate in it, and maybe eventually cost him his life. But on the way, he had a couple of things to say about friendship, and so I thought I would just point a couple of things out. He wrote an essay that we still have. It's called On Friendship, and it's not long. It's, if you've read The Republic, that was a conversation between Socrates and various other people, and Cicero wrote his treatise on friendship in the same kind of ways. It's this conversation, this older man who's lost a friend, and he's reflecting on with his sons-in-law on what it means to be a friend, and they're asking him questions, and he answers. He's like, "Oh, I think that's enough on that topic." And I say, "No, you have so much wisdom. We want to hear more." And so Cicero's writing this dialogue, and he starts it interestingly by saying that friendship is the greatest thing in the world. And I thought that was an amazing statement. There's a lot of good things. Now, I think there are one or two things that exceed friendship in terms of greatness. But from a Roman's point of view, especially one who ends up getting exiled to Greece because he doesn't have friends that will stand behind him. He had associates and he had allies, but he didn't have any friends. And so when he's exiled to Greece, he's thinking about these sorts of things. Gosh, I wish I had better friends. And I wouldn't be in this situation if I had better friends. And is it because the friends I have are bad people? Maybe, but also maybe because I didn't cultivate the sort of friendships I need. And so I'm encouraged when I hear you say that you're trying to give your teachers opportunities to come together and help one another and work together and have casual time together. I think that's really important. And of course, Cicero has much more to say on this, but I thought it'd be interesting to hear what your thoughts are.
I think it's very telling that in Cicero's reflection that he ends up reflecting on friendship when there's so many other things that happened throughout his life that he could have reflected on, and yet he saw friendship as such an important thing that he took the time to write about it and to speak about it. Friends change us. Friends could have changed the course of his life had they been there to defend him and to go to bat for him. But friends can also be a challenge for us, right? And so I love that Cicero took the time to really dig into that idea of friendship and emphasize it.
Yeah, he said that one of the things he thought highly about friendship is that, and why he thought it was the greatest thing in the world, is because in his view it was exactly what we need. This is what he says. It was exactly what we need in prosperity and adversity. And again, he's thinking about prosperity where, and he ended up owning a villa above the Forum in Rome, and it was beautiful and big and luxurious. And he had a smaller house before that. So in prosperity, here he was, and he didn't have anyone to keep him humble. And he, really, I think at a certain point believed this idea that he was the father of Rome, which is what he actually called himself because of stopping this conspiracy. Of course, that would also be his undoing later, but he didn't have anybody keep him humble. And I think about that with our teachers when they have great success, and like their test scores come back and they're fantastic, or the kids write papers that are magnificent, and the teacher thinks, "Ha ha, I've done it." And so I think it's probably useful, and you can tell me what you think, to have somebody there to say, slow down a little bit. This is one moment in time. This is one group of people. Don't let this go to your head.
Friendship, when healthy and when you place the appropriate emphasis on it in your schools or in your personal life, it brings a level of accountability that is beautiful. And I love accountability in friendship because sometimes it's hard to hear you need to be humble from someone who doesn't know you and doesn't love you. But when you have that friendship and you have that built-in accountability, someone can come alongside you and say, you're right, those test scores are great, but let's talk about how you're approaching this, or let's talk about your, how you're feeling about this, or how you make someone else feel if you're being proud. So I think the value of friendship isn't just camaraderie or, someone to enjoy something with, but it also is the value of accountability and someone who loves you and can come and say, maybe we need to think about this differently or approach this differently.
I think you're right that it's hard to hear that. Sometimes it's hard to hear from your friends.
Yes.
Be humble, but at least probably they have your best interests in mind. I mean that's the idea. And we'll talk about. I'm going to talk about the thing that should bind us together as friends. The other point that he makes, which I mentioned, was it's exactly what we need in adversity. Right, so he's sitting there in Greece, and he's been tossed out because, through the Callan conspiracy, he uncovers the conspirators and who want to overthrow the republic, and he has them executed. I think there were 5 of them he had executed without a trial, and it was shocking because if there's one thing the Roman Republic was known for was the rule of law. It's why our founding fathers looked back to Rome because of all the law they codified. It gave them a basis for establishing law in a free society. And so then this idea that the great father of Rome would actually have some people executed without a trial, again, it was shocking, and in the end, it would lead to his banishment. And I think he reflected that in this victory that turned into a defeat. It would have been nice to have some people there to say, it's going to be okay. You'll get through this, right? And I think we have that same kind of situation in our schools. Like if we have a school that's not performing very well academically, and I think it's good to have people there to say, it's going to be okay.
I also think that as a teacher, as an educator, someone in this school environment, we are part of something that's bigger than ourselves, and we know that. You're not. It's often people joke you're not a teacher for the pay, right? Or you're not a teacher for the cushy hours and ease of workload. But we do it because we understand that there's something bigger than us. And I think I've seen and experienced that when you have others around you who know that there's something bigger than you and bigger than yourself in what you're doing, it helps you keep perspective, and it helps get through those challenging times, and it helps you work through some of those obstacles that you might face because you have someone, a comrade at arms, and you have someone who says, I know this is hard, and I'm in it for the same reasons as you, and I care about it for the same reasons as you, and I care about you, and so we'll do this together. And I think that might have made a difference for Cicero to have comrade at arms, and someone who was walking through it with him and could reflect on it with him.
Well, I think you've hit on his definition, actually, of friendship. I think we need to define it, and hopefully, we still have people at this point listening because we waited a long time to get to the definition. We're about 20 something minutes into the conversation. We haven't even said, but I think we all intuitively get what friendship is. But I think it's good to define things. Mm-hmm. And Cicero said that friends are two people who are in accord with one another, in agreement, and we can talk about what is it that upon which they're agreeing. That two people who are in accord and are joined with mutual goodwill and affection. And I love the way he puts that. Now, the accord is, in his view, virtue. That we agree that that the pursuit of the good through our actions, which is one way of looking at virtue, is essential to success, to flourishing, and that we have to have goodwill for each other, and we really have to want the other person to succeed. I use this example when I was talking to the teachers about two teachers, and they're teaching side by side. Now, I remember your building in particular, one of your new ones, because the insulation was really bad between a couple of your classrooms. I remember being in there, and one teacher's trying to talk about Frankenstein, and in the other classroom, I don't know what was going on, but it's really noisy. So, part of that friendship, that goodwill, is those teachers knowing the conditions that they're in, and then realizing that, say there's a teacher over here that she's giving a test, or they're having this important conversation, right? And the other teacher wants that teacher to be successful in her plan for the day. And that goodwill then would mean, well, maybe I have to rethink about what I'm doing in my room where I'm making all this noise. Maybe I should go outside, take my class outside and do the noise out there, right? So there's that goodwill feature. And then just the affection for one another. I've got a person next to me who shares my view on pursuing good, and not only does he or she share that interest, but is actually doing it. And Cicero thought that when we're around people who are seeking the good for themselves and for others, that it kind of infects us, and we want it to. And with that infection is affection, and it draws us together. And I so I was hoping that the teachers I was talking to would hear that and think, you know what, I want the teacher teaching next door, who I don't even think about during the day, I want her to be successful. How do I help her do that in the context of my own room? And that's what, in my view, that's what friends do for each other.
It is. And I love that you use that word accord. I think that that's such a beautiful word. In our society and culture today, and often we see it on social media, we run into it in lots of different environments, there's a spirit of comparison and pride. Sometimes there's a spirit of suspicion of other people, which then generates fear. And all of those are the antithesis of accord, right? And we don't want our teachers to try to one-up one another or be better than one another. My classroom is cuter on Pinterest than your classroom is, right? We don't want those things to sneak in. And what we are looking for is this beautiful accord between teachers. I have an example from another one of our campuses that I wanted to share. And we had a teacher, unfortunately, need to leave the school mid-year. And with her leaving, we were having a hard time filling that position and finding someone else to come in. And so we asked one other teacher to sort of carry the load of some of those things in that classroom. We had an aide in there, and this other teacher was really going to be responsible for teaching 2 full classes of children. The remainder of the staff, it's a small school, heard about that. And multiple other teachers, this was a lower grade, even teachers who taught upper elementary school, offered to jump in and take over a subject matter. And so we had a situation where one teacher was going to carry this huge load, but because of their care for one another and their common goal, different teachers stepped in at different times of the day, giving up their prep period and their downtime during the day to go in and relieve this one teacher from all of that burden, but also then to carry out the common goal, to invest in the children, to share their expertise with a group of kids who weren't assigned to them. And it's beautiful when friendship does that. And the really special thing about that is as the year ended, not only did those students benefit greatly from all of those teachers investing in them for a common goal, but the teachers built even a stronger bond between one another because they walked through that journey together and supported each other. And it was a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story. And of course, I know the school you're talking about. And I think that many, if not all of our campuses are willing, I find teachers are willing to do that sort of thing. And I think that's great. Here's a kind of a related question. Maybe it's a leading question, but do our students watch our teachers?
Our students watch our teachers all the time. And our students are really intuitive. I recently spoke to a group of teachers at Prosper, and I told them, there's that little song from when you were children, oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see, right? Because kids see everything, right? And kids notice when teachers don't care for one another or in competition with each other. But kids also know when teachers care for one another and have each other's back. Middle school students often decide that they want to play one teacher against another, or see what they can maybe, challenge or get away with. And it's an amazing thing when the teachers are in alignment and in agreement, and have friendships with one another. And you find that students are less likely to do those things. But kids are watching us, and we want to ensure that our teachers are modeling friendship, because our kids may not have great examples of friendship in their lives. And so the teachers have the opportunity not only to teach a subject matter, but teach about character and relationship and what that looks like.
Yeah, I think it's one thing for a teacher, I mentioned this earlier in the conversation, to say, now friends, you need to do this for each other. And I think that the children hear that and draw their own conclusions about the meaning of that word, friend. Partly from the tone that's being used, partly from the context, but certainly from the example. And you and I have talked about a number of situations where the students are playing the teachers off of each other. And sometimes that's just, students being immature and they either think it's amusing or they are trying to achieve a certain outcome, not always in their own best interest, but just like, they play mom and dad off each other at home for some kind of outcome. But I think it's one thing to know that your teachers are, in concert with one another, that they're all, supporting the rules, and that from teacher to teacher that the rules are going to be enforced consistently and you're not going to get away with things. But I think it's another thing when you see that, the teachers like each other and want to be together. I think where children can see that adults, whether it's their parents or the teachers, like each other, I think it sets a really good example for how they should look at their fellow students. We teach all of our students about virtue, about being courageous and persevering and having gratitude and serving one another and being civil to one another. And we ask our teachers to model it. And when they model it as friends, and there's that, goodwill and affection that Cicero mentions in the middle of that, my hope anyway is that the kids will emulate it, and that'll just become part of who they are. And that's that they want to be like their teachers, right?
They do. And, you asked me earlier how, as a headmaster, I would cultivate or allow opportunity for friendship. I think it's really important that our teachers have fun together and that our students see them having fun together, right? And that they see our teachers learning together and discussing things together and having commonalities with each other, so that it's beyond just, like you said, a cordial relationship in the hallway or a pleasant workplace. But there's something deeper and more important there. And students crave that joy, and they crave those experiences that are positive and encouraging. And so when they see them in teachers, they not only want to have them and want to be part of them, but I think they respect their teachers more because they see them as human.
Yeah. I think it's especially important for teachers to take on this responsibility because there's less hierarchy with teachers. They're all teachers, with the administrator, the headmaster, the assistant headmasters, they're in charge and there's authority there. And it's a little harder to model because there's a reporting relationship. And frankly, the children don't see those individuals on campuses as much, but they see their teachers all day long. And to see the teachers smiling at each other and asking them how is their class period going, or complimenting them on their art board that's in their hallway or something else that's happened, I think is really important because they're peers and they're equals in their responsibility, and so that's why I think it's especially important that's coming from teachers.
And I think your example that you shared about the two classrooms being next to each other and hearing the volume between the classrooms and the noise level and the teachers showing care and deference to one another is also important for students to see. So it's not just that they see teachers having fun together or enjoying each other or complimenting each other, but they see a teacher, again, for something bigger than themselves, making a sacrifice or giving of themselves for another teacher, of modeling and verbalizing what it is to respect someone for who they are and what their talents are and what their purpose is.
Well, there's more to it also. And I'm sure at this point, we're like at the 30-something minute mark, and people might be saying, gosh, this is a lot on friendship. But look around, nobody talks about it. I mean, we have, in the schools, you like I've been saying, you'll have people say, well, we need to be friends. But what does it mean? And in society as at large, I don't feel like friendship is something that's really truly valued. I think it's just assumed that you have, friends right around you, maybe from work or from your childhood or college or church or whatever. But we don't really talk about, the benefit of it and what binds us together and how important it is. And part of me feels like it's on purpose. The Texas and Arkansas constitutions talk about the purpose of education as being the diffusion of knowledge and virtue for the preservation of individual rights. And I bring this up a lot because it's our first charge in the state constitutions. And I was having a conversation with somebody today about it, and what I wanted to get across is that those individual rights isn't just libertinism so we can just do whatever we want. It's really so the government leaves us to our own flourishing and doesn't get involved in our lives. But that flourishing really isn't going to happen, without friendship. And for me, the school is one of the most important places that happens. I think we have a responsibility to not just model it, but to talk about it and let our children know that this is what it means to be a friend. And it isn't just that I'm not picking on you. It's so much more.
It is. And if you hear or talk to a parent and you ask what is important about your child's school experience at one of our campuses, they will say they want them to learn things, and they want them to experience things, and they want them to grow in virtue and maturity. But often a parent will say, I want them to have friends.
Yeah.
And that's important. And so it's important for us as school leaders to talk about friendship, to cultivate friendship, to make time for friendship within our classrooms, and to model that for our students and help them understand what friendship looks like. And sometimes what friendship doesn't look like. We often learn a lot from the antithesis of something, right? And learning what it doesn't look like. And kids often make mistakes on playgrounds and in the hallways and learn about that. But it's important for us to prioritize friendships on our campuses.
Yeah. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't reference the Greek word for friendship. I would hear about it from Mr. Karos.
You absolutely would.
He always reminds us everything has its root in the Greek world, which, of course, he's Greek and has great affection for all things Greek. But we talked about that affection, right? And an easy way to just say that is love for one another. And actually, that's the Greek word for friend is philos. We think of Philadelphia, city of brotherly love. That idea that we love one another and treat each other like brothers. And the word itself can mean, among other things, dearly loved. And I hope that the children, as they're going through their coursework, are watching teachers who love one another and care for one another, and are walking along again aside next to each other out of goodwill and accord. And I guess that can sound idealistic of me, but I think we can strive for it, and I think we need to talk about it so that the children know how to emulate it, and hopefully over time teach others as well.
Friendship is an invitation in many cases. that idea of brotherly love, that idea of caring for someone beyond yourself and having a common goal and a common purpose and being in accord. It's an invitation. And so it is our hope on our campuses with our teachers and with our families and our students that we invite them into friendship. So I love that we're talking about it and starting that conversation. And it's our hope that this conversation will continue not only teacher to teacher, but with our administrators and with our families that trust us with their children, and that we model that to our students.
Interestingly, Cicero describes friendship as the most valuable and beautiful furniture of life. Mm-hmm. He's thinking of this beautiful house he had, and that he lost it. I mean, it wasn't furnished with the right things. I almost hesitate to tell the story, but once I told my wife that her eyes, I actually referenced this with her today at lunch, but I once told her that her eyes were the color of furniture.
I don't know if I'd like that.
Yeah, right. I was young. When I said it. I was thinking of a place that was furnished with fine, rich, brown, deep brown furniture. So maybe a swing and a miss as far as a compliment goes. But this idea that we have these furnishings in our home that sort of tell us where we are. Whether we're in poverty or we're in prosperity or somewhere in between, and Cicero is saying all that's great, but it's not the same, and it doesn't furnish our lives with hope and love and confidence and a sense of right and wrong, the way friends are, the way that friends do when they walk with us in accord and with mutual goodwill and affection. So he thought deeply about this, and I hope we can encourage our teachers to do the same, because I think when we go together on the journey, bringing it back to our little groups of friends, right? They went on these journeys, and maybe they became better friends, like Huck and Jim on the way, real friends on the way. But I hope that when we start the journey, it's because we already are in accord. We already agree that virtue is absolutely necessary, and that we want to go together. And it's not just that we're thrown into this thing together, but we actually say, yes, I want to help these children become knowledgeable and virtuous and flourishing human beings. I want them to know what it means to be human at the end of the day. And can we do that together? Because it takes a lot of us to get that done, right?
It really does. And on a personal note, I have to say that I have been truly blessed and sometimes overwhelmed by the friendships that I've acquired and built and cultivated as part of Founders Classical Academies. And there have been people who have impacted me for the good and challenged me and held me accountable. Because we do have a common purpose and a love of classical education and a deep desire and a love to give hope to students, and to cultivate in them a love of virtue and to order their affections in a way that is beautiful. And so friendships have impacted and changed me, and I hope the same for our students and our staff.
Right, absolutely. Well, Founders is a special place. I really believe that, and we don't get everything right, and sometimes there's discord.
But that's part of the journey.
Right. It absolutely is. And hopefully each time we have a success, we remind each other, don't get a big head. And when we fail, and sometimes it happens, that we're like, it'll be okay.
And we pick each other up.
Pick each other up and get back on with it. So I hope that our listeners got something out of this. I hope that whether it's parents or maybe teachers listening to this, or others thinking about their desire to see a classical school come to their area, that they realize that we're looking for people who want to be friends with each other and can go on this journey with us together. If we have that, I think we're in pretty good shape.
We are.